Welcome to the Inside Scoop, your one-stop shop for cracking the leadership code. Have you ever wondered what those conversations are like in the boardroom? Curious about the secret sauce successful executives possess? On the Inside Scoop podcast, we sit down with successful executives, getting their unique perspective on what it takes to be a good leader. They'll share their hard-won wisdom, the crucial competencies needed to thrive as a leader, and the unexpected lessons learned along the way. Here, we unlock the secrets of the executive suite. We get the inside track directly from the leaders themselves. In each episode, we'll dissect the essential skills needed to go from manager to leader, offering a leader's perspective on the challenges, triumphs, and unexpected wisdom they've acquired. The Inside Scoop, leadership lessons, served fresh.
Glad you joined us for another episode of the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Eduardo Bryant. Here is where we dive into issues that leaders face on a regular basis. Some of these things are right in their wheelhouse. Sometimes they're trained on how to do these things, other times they're not. Nonetheless, we pull back the onion and allow ourselves to really invest and dig into these things. If you hear something that you like and you can connect with it, we invite you to subscribe and to become part of our viewing audience. This podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. Well, we have put a good one today together for you. We have none other than Mr. Andrew Bickers. He is a sales leader and an author of the playbook, Setting the Pick. You're going to enjoy his story. So I invite you to tune in and to really enjoy him. Let's welcome him in right now. Mr. Andrew, how you doing, sir?
Eduardo, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
You know what? It is a pleasure to have you with us. Before we begin, I always like to start out with this. As a leader, how are you keeping yourself sharp and on top of your game? In other words, what are you reading right now?
There's a couple things. There's reading and then there's health too. So I take care of my health. I take care of myself first.
Mhm.
I'm at the gym at 4:30 in the morning, not because I like mornings. It's because nobody messes with me at 4:30 in the morning. There's no fire drill at the end of the day to push it and have it canceled. So take care of your health if you're going to be a good leader. People will respect it and follow that for sure. As far as reading, I'm always reading something. Specifically at the moment, it's not necessarily something on leadership, but it's this book called The Book of Charlie. And it's about a 109-year-old man and the stories that he shares with his neighbor, and the neighbor being the author of this book. Really kind of takes you through everything that this guy has gone through, the various revolutions and industrial growth from farming to technology, and what this man's been through over over 100 years, which is kind of exciting for somebody that really appreciates history. And as a student of history, it's been nice to kind of read through with this one. So I'm enjoying it.
Wow, 109 years old. What a blessing that is. I'm sure there's some great stories in there. I'd like to even come back to that. And I definitely want to get into your book, that playbook on setting the pick. But before we get into that, I want to know about you. And I'm sure the audience is so interested to hear your story, the places you've been and how you got to where you are. I'm sure it wasn't just a straight line. Must have been some meandering curves in there. Share with us, how did you get to where you are?
Um, I've been fortunate to be surrounded around just some amazing people, like from day one, as a child all the way to now. It's something I'm extremely grateful for. I had a father that was in sales. He retired as president of sales from this company. He did real well. You would say that I was probably just born for it. It was what was going to happen. I joined the military when I was in college, right after 9/11. I felt the patriotic tug to go and take care of our country and do that. So I joined the Air Force. After college, I went straight into sales. Um, I have a knack for teaching and coaching. It's a passion of mine, and so I like to pour into others and share what I've been reading, giving back. And so that's one of the reasons why I created the playbook, Setting Your Pick, to help leaders and help salespeople be productive and successful in their career growth. But yeah, I've been in sales for 20ish years. Been leading teams for close to 12 or 13 years. in various sales orgs, and yeah, happy to be here, man. It's been a wild ride.
You know what? Thank you so much for your service to our country. I mean, joining the Air Force after 9/11, I mean, that must have been exhilarating and frightening to some degree. And I mean, what was it that really pushed you that way? I think that's awesome. What took you there?
So I went to a military school. So I went to the Military College of Georgia, which is known now as the University of North Georgia. Um, and when 9/11 happened, I mean, there were friends of mine that were immediately getting activated and deployed. And so there was already, some of that born into us having being in a military school. But it was, I mean, you remember 9/11 was something that brought the country together during an incredibly divisive time. And it's unfortunate that it took a war and the 9/11 atrocities to do that, but it was one of the last times I really saw the country pull together. And I think that was one thing that grabbed me, right? It was a part of that bonding to the country, to do your duty, right? And at the same time, I won't, you know, as young as I was, probably the smartest decision I could think of was, I want to do this because at some point later on down the road, I want to have something I can share with my kids or be proud of, right? And I didn't want to get down the road and be upset that I didn't take the chance. It also prepared me for a life of jumping into change and trying things that were scary, frightening, right? I was, 20, 21-year-old kid going into the military, didn't really know what I was doing. Um, but it was a good experience for, gaining leadership as well as putting yourself into some scary situations and learning how to wade through them.
I think that that's awesome. I can remember as you were talking about 9/11, exactly where I was standing.
Mhm.
And when everything happened and the first plane hit one of the Twin Towers, I actually had a plane ticket. I was headed to Las Vegas for a meeting. The company I was working for at the time, we had a big meeting that was there, and I was actually jumping on a plane that morning. Of course, we all remember everything got grounded, so none of us went. But I can remember standing. I was in my bedroom, standing by my dresser, and I had just gotten dressed, and I was getting ready to grab my bags, and I was going to head off. So, to much of what you're saying, yeah, it was what a time that was, and it really did bring the country together. And I hadn't seen the country come together like that in a long time, but here we are, so divided right now. And obviously, we don't want a 9/11 to bring us together, but something needs to push that button so that we can get off of this divisiveness that we have. And I call it the us against them mentality. It is so bad for our country, so bad.
It's interesting. It's so many people, and it's not one demographic or the other. It's not elderly or younger, or it's so many people consider only the circumstance and not the career, or they only look at circumstance and they don't look at the future. They operate, with blinders on for the moment, right? And there's things that you can do to enjoy the moment, but when it's a negative situation and you feel like you need to make a comment or you need to act swiftly, and it can erode what you were hoping to build down the road, right, and into your future. And certainly, it's something that I consider and look at, as a leader, and the people that you're leading. I don't want them to compromise, their careers, right? I want them to build them, and I want them to build their brand and do some amazing things. And that's why I talk about them, like circumstance over career. You can ruin career based on something you do in a moment.
Hmm. Great point there. I'm thinking as you're talking about the whole leadership thing and how within companies we play such a central role as a leader because our job is not only to, train and coach and bring new blood into the organization, but it's also to, affect the morale. And that starts with our own team. So if you are a people leader and you've got a team that you're managing, you're trying to make sure that, it's almost a family type atmosphere, at least a feeling of one. Certainly, you want morale to be high. And then there's dissension that starts to creep in. And when that happens as a leader, now you've got to figure out, how do I put the fire out? How do I keep that from spreading? What do I do about this? And it reminds me of a lot of scenarios that come up that we have to deal with on a regular basis as a leader. Things like, what happens when there's a promoted position open and two people go for it and only one gets it? The other person that does not get it, they didn't get that promotion yet. They may have been the one viewed as the shoe-in for sure. They deserve it. They're next in line. But if they don't get it, now what do you do with that? Do you say nothing and let that breathe? You'll hear water cooler talk. What could happen there? Or do you proactively as a leader go out and say, okay, how do I handle this? Because the person that did not get it, maybe they didn't get it because they didn't have the competencies, but nobody else knows that unless they know what the competencies are for that position that's open. If they don't know that, then they can't figure out why Johnny didn't get the job. They're just mad along with Johnny. And so as a leader, we're now trying to tease these things out and figure out, okay, how do we go to bat for this? So in my opening, when I talk about some of these things we get trained on how to handle, some of these things we don't. This is one of those areas that we typically don't get trained on. We just have to figure it out as we go along. And if we make a mistake, then it could be devastating.
Yeah. And you don't tolerate toxic behavior and talk in the workplace, right? But when somebody is, you know, whether it's a promotion or, you know, anything that they're trying to get, and they've got some comment or kind of going back to that circumstance, and they make their point, or they share this at the water cooler that was negative, it's a really good question. This is a good question to ask them. What did that do? Like, what did you prove? You made this comment, you said this online, you told Johnny at the water cooler this. Is life better because of that conversation? What did it prove? You won that argument. Well, congratulations. Did it do anything? Or did you just win an argument? Right? Or did you make somebody feel this way? And somebody asked me that a long time ago. And I started using caution in certain responses for sure.
Interesting. So now when you were asked that question about that, did it change your behavior on anything, or were you pretty much already in line with what you think today?
Yeah, so it was during college actually, and I came back from a kind of a political debate. So there was a point in having the political debate, but I took it a little farther and was basically, I didn't want to belittle the other person, but I drove my point home and I was real proud of it. You know, I got some cheers and this, and I went home and I told my dad that I did this, and he's like, what did it prove? What did you do? What did you get out of it? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, did you win? Is there a trophy that came with that? Like, I mean, what? He's like, and I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but he's like, what did you get out of this? And I'm like, it just made me rethink how I spoke to that person.
Was that one of the examples, especially it sounded like it came from your dad, which is a great place for those types of things to come. We call that wisdom. Was that part of the genesis of your playbook? Setting the pick. Was that part of it, and some other things that came out about it? And then share a little bit about that book and some of the ideas that are in there, and also tell us where we can get it.
So you can't find it online. It's mine. I keep it kind of close, right? Because I sell it and provide it. But I wanted a playbook that was different. I wanted a playbook that created a mindset, right? That you needed to latch onto to prep yourself for following certain steps and being a good leader, being a good salesperson. And the start of my presentation, and anybody that's gone through this with me, they see this. There's a picture of my family at a dinner table, right? And I think we as leaders think we'll notice good, positive change in the office based on how we treat people or what we offer them or provide them, right? Like if the company's okay, we think the positive change is going to be seen in the office. I don't think you're going to get it, right? I don't think you're going to see all the positive change. There's certainly going to be some fruits of this, but the positive change is going to happen in their personal life. And you've got to be okay with letting them experience that and not being the hero in this story, right? because my goal is for people to have a better dinner table and experience with their family. And I think it's extremely lacking in the world today. I think it's certainly lacking in the business world. And I want to send people home at their best. I want to provide them a good work environment. I want to provide them the tools they need to do to be successful in the job, but so that they go home with less stress and not ruin their dinner table experience with their spouse, significant other, or their children. They don't have a family to go home to at the dinner table, whatever, the pub on their way home with their buddies, because inevitably they're going to share something that happened during the day. And I want to change it from, gosh, this happened at work to, see, you're not going to believe what we accomplished today. You're not going to believe what happened at work today. It was awesome. Let's get this, right? So I share that. I start that off with the playbook to get them into the mindset of, let's change what's going on in their home and be okay with not being the hero, right? Let them go and experience that and be the hero in their own right. We'll see the effects at work, right? They will bring back less stress into the office if things at home are okay too. Nobody wants to tell the board that. Nobody wants to buy in it. VC money is not pouring in because of that statement, right? And I'm okay with it, but I know what I want to change in the world, and that's that. It's the dinner table experience for everyone.
And you're hitting on some key cylinders there, because you've heard this quote before, I'm sure, and that is that most people who are in some kind of a leadership role, they can fall within this category, and that is this: that your manager has a greater effect on your mental health than your therapist or your doctor. So when you talk about dinner time conversations coming home from the office, we often ask this question when we're doing leadership, is we'll say we're in a big room, all the leaders are in there, the executives, the C-suite, and we'll ask them, raise your hand if you've ever had a bad manager. Invariably, every hand in the room goes up. And we say, wow. The other part of that is this: most people who have a bad manager in the office are unable to just leave it at the office. They take that home in some capacity. It comes home with them, even though they try really hard not to. What you talked about, I think, is key, trying to make sure that they don't take something stressful home. We call it seeing the glass half full versus half empty. So when they do go home, they can bring a positive experience, which is helpful on the family. How many people today are on high blood pressure medication because of the stress of work? How many people are getting a divorce? I mean, these are sad things. How many people are drinking more? How many folks are now doing drugs, trying to cope with the stress from work? So I love your perspective on recognizing that when you send people home positively, it has a great effect on all those other things, not just coming home and having a good dinner time conversation.
Yeah, you owe it to their family, right? I don't have negative coaching experiences after 3 p.m. This was a lesson that I had to learn as well, right? It can wait till tomorrow. I'm not going to have a bad conversation with somebody on a Friday, period, because you can ruin their weekend. I ruined somebody's weekend, having to coach them negatively. And it can wait till Monday, right? If there's not some legal ramification, emergency for having the conversation, it can wait. And you will probably handle the conversation differently yourself if you put some pause and wait till the morning too. So, yeah.
No, I like that. Okay, I like that. So let's say that there's a new manager, brand new, just been promoted. He's stepping into his first people leadership role, mid-level. He's excited, or she, of course, and they're all ready to go. We like to think of things we call nuggets, pearls of wisdom. I want you to take a moment. I want you to think about, I don't know, a couple of things, maybe 3 or 4, however many you've got, that you say either someone told you as a new manager that was helpful, or maybe things that you've formulated over the years that you've been in management, the dozen or so years, that you say, if I had to do it all over again, here's a couple of things that I would do different. And I think you just gave us one. I love that one. I'm going to write that one down, which is no negative conversation after 3. And certainly no negative news on a Friday. It's not like, give us bad news on Friday, or how about the day before Christmas, right? See you on Monday. You've just ruined their weekend, like you said you've done before. So think about that. And I'm sure the people would love to hear from an author as well as a senior manager in the VP space. What are a couple of those things that maybe they can grab a hold to?
Yeah. So let people fail and touch the fire, just like you do with your children, right? You let them scrape their knees, they learn from it, they remember that experience so that they either avoid it or it hurts less next time, right? Um, it's okay to let your middle managers kind of fail, right? You don't want to put them into a situation that they're compromising their career. That's not what I'm saying, but let them make some mistakes, right? Then let them kind of start to figure it out. Don't just have the ready playbook step by step. Part of your playbook and process should incorporate some margin for failure, so that you can see what they're doing. It gives you something to coach too, right? So you want to see how they react in certain areas, and it'll allow you to coach middle management differently if you let them step in and make some failures. So one, let them burn their fingers. To think back on things I wish I had known or that somebody had given me, I don't know. It's a good question, but I don't know if I'd have the experience or the playbook to provide you had I known that back then either, right? But it is still good to have people go through their varying experiences so that they can build their story, they can create their story, and go from there. The one that I shared with you about no negative feedback on Fridays and after 3 p.m. came from a previous manager of mine. It was good. The other thing is align on values earlier with the people you're going to be working with, because you're going to spend more time with them than you will your family and friends. It just is, right? You're putting, let's say, at least 40 hours a week into your job, and you're spending time with those people. You should align on their values. And if they can't, if the hiring entity cannot express the values for which they hire, you should run from that. You should move on from that. One of the things in the podcast Culture Bus that I was running was I wanted to know what drove good culture. I wanted to know what people thought of good culture. And I've posted the data before, so I'm not totally guessing at it, but I'll just kind of round. But about 80% of senior leaders, founders, C-level executives attributed good culture to some sort of action. Hard work, right? The entry-level employees, new employees, recent college graduates, younger folks that I got to speak with attributed good culture to feelings and how the company made me feel. It was warm. I felt good. I felt valued. He was like a second father to me, right? And it was like uncanny. Like it was like 80% of both of those demographics, where one was on actions and the other was on feelings. 0% of the people I interviewed at the same company could agree on what their mission, values, and vision were, right? That is dangerous. That's scary, that there's this massive disparity between those two groups of people at the same companies. And even fewer, or a little slightly more than that, but a few group of people attributed good culture to actual values. And through that conversation, I was able to build the values that I wanted, that I expected others to work with. And my previous company did this. Like they would talk about their culture daily till your eyes bleed, based on the values that they brought. But it wasn't just values as a sweet little anecdote or cute phrase or word. They could explain in detail what was expected of one and what you should expect of others in various situations based on those values, right? So I could say honesty is a value. I think everybody has honesty as a value. But that should just be known. Like I assume that you have integrity. I assume, Eduardo, you're not robbing a bank this afternoon. I think you're probably a pretty good guy, right? We're buds, and I think you're an honest person. But when I talk about honesty as a value, I want you to be honest with yourself. At the end of the day, grade yourself. Were you a 7 out of 10? Were you a 5 out of 10? Be really honest with yourself. Not me. I know you're going to be honest with me, but how good were you today? There should be very few 10s. If you're somebody that's giving yourself a 10, you've got the EQ of a field mouse. Like, you really aren't understanding what your purpose in this business is. I've got more 5s than I have 10s. I have more 3s than I have 10s. Right. And I fluctuate a lot of times between like a 5 and an 8. It's kind of where I am, because there's always something that I can do better. And so in hiring good culture and aligning leaders with individuals, and it's speaking to this clearly as a leader so that your middle management knows how to hire people based on like values. And certainly if you're interviewing in another company, you should be doing your fair amount of interviewing that company as well. But look at those type of values that you can then point to at the end of the day. To be honest with yourself on the way out, like, how did that meeting go that we just had? What do you think?
You know what? I like that. Tell me a little bit about that, because I can just imagine I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, that's a good point there, Andrew. So other people that are listening are saying, great, I like these types of, I call them asset tests, where we evaluate ourselves, which is what we should always be doing, because you really can't lie to you. I mean, you know the truth, right? No matter what anyone else says, deep down on the inside, that feeling says, you flubbed this all up, but you don't want to let anybody else know you flubbed it up, right? But on the inside, you know that you did. What
And
are
that's
some?
just one value. So it's like you should have, 3 to 7 values that are important to you as your organization, right? And to you as an individual.
Would you say that there's a set of common values, so that you don't just have individuality where people are measuring themselves all across the board on things that may not, amount to much? But would you say there's like some core values that perhaps all of us should be kind of using as a yardstick to measure how well we did?
I think so, right? I think it can make you it can improve your home life. It'll certainly improve your business work ethic and business life as well. But I mean, some of the ones that I have and that I shared with my previous company were grit, right? Honesty, courage, really having the courage to go out and fail and figure things out, but then being honest with yourself on how you failed. um, Acting like an owner is a big one, right? The grit, I think, in the sales world is extremely important, as well as like curiosity. I try to hire people that are curious. And then I have a set of questions that I typically answer or ask when I'm in a interview session. Your directors, everybody that's going to be interviewing this person needs to kind of have a theme and a set of questions that you need to do or ask, so that you can score individuals afterwards, and so that you can go, okay, this is how he answered this question. Well, he answered it differently from me. All right. And then score and rate him. Is he or she a 10, or is she a 6, right? What are we going to get out of this individual if we hire him? And there's a few things that I really try to focus on when I'm interviewing people, obviously aligning on the values, but in sales particular, we're looking, I call it hard knocks in OCS. I want somebody that's got a need for achievement. They're optimistic, they're competitive, and they operate with a sense of urgency. Okay. And those are some things that I focus on. But then inevitably, my favorite question for somebody to ask me when I'm interviewing them is, what is it going to take for me to be successful here? Like, great question. I'm glad you were asking. And most people worth their salt as an interviewee are going to ask something along those lines at some point during your interview process. And I'm going to go, it's called the what, how, will method, right? We can decide what we want to do to be successful at this company, and then we will provide the how. Okay. And I'm going to be very, very ultra clear on that. Those are things that can be defined and coached. You have to decide whether or not you're willing to do it. All right. What do you want to do? I want to be the number 1 sales rep in the company. Congratulations. This is how we're going to do it. You're going to have to make more calls. You're going to have to make more sacrifices and spend more time doing said activities. Are you willing to do that? Yes or no? You mentioned the divorce rate in the US earlier, right? What do you want to do as a spouse? I want to be a really good spouse. I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good husband. How are you going to do it? Well, it involves sacrifice, right? I don't get to go play golf, after a week of work, right? That's a 5-hour day. If I can, but I want to invest in my family life and be a good husband and be a good dad, then there has to be sacrifices that come along with that, right? How am I going to do it? Well, I'm going to put my wife's needs before mine at times. Am I perfect at this? Absolutely not. Believe me, she's upstairs. You can talk to her. She'll give you a list of things that I could do better. She and I, we love chirping at each other. But you got to decide as a spouse, are you willing to do those things? And 60% of the country are not. We all go in with good intentions. We all make vows before God, friends, and, a pastor, but most people are not willing to continue doing it. Eduardo, every January, what do most Americans do to kick off their new year? They do they make
a new year, they have a like a national sales meeting.
No, I'm saying like just Americans in general. They make a New Year's resolution.
Oh, resolution. Yes, New Year's resolution.
Yeah. And one of the more popular ones is to be healthier.
Yep.
Okay, so what do you want to do? I want to be healthier. How are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to go to the gym and work out, and I'm going to make smart diet choices, right? But most people are not willing to do it come April. Most people certainly aren't willing to do it throughout the rest of the year. And so I share that with individuals, and they ask me that question, what am I going to do to be successful? I'm like, well, what is it you want to do? Okay, you want to hit quota, you want to be number one, you want to make a trip, you want to pay for this, that. Okay, we're going to provide you all the house to be wildly successful at this company. You need to decide whether or not you're willing. Most people are not. Most people I've hired are not willing to do everything that it takes. It's a tough hire to get people that are willing, because you can't coach it, you can't teach will.
No, it comes from within.
You can certainly motivate with the stick or the carrot, but that's you. That's not them.
That's right. And part of that, though, is the manager, because there's a component in there when a person joins an organization and they want to be successful. There is a component in there of how their manager treats them, supports them, motivates them, backs them, has, everything that they need to help them be successful, saying the right things. Because when you've got a great boss, a great manager, you'll run through walls for that person, because you want to please them and make them happy, because they're providing you with what you need. And so that's important. So all of those kind of things, you don't want to have a defeatist attitude because your boss is not supporting you. Is everything you try to do, they shoot you down. They don't give you any autonomy. You don't have free thought. You just can't do what you need to do. So if you don't have that support system, then of course it becomes even that much more difficult to be successful. Those things that you just talked about, those things are great. You put that in a person and you say, go for it. I allow you to do these things. And you will fail. You will fall flat on your face. That is going to happen. But that's where the growth is. Every time you fail, you learn how not to do it. These are the things that make you better, is every time you fall down and you get back up and say, okay, well, I brushed myself off. That didn't work. Let me try something else. And we get better. So that's good management. And you're talking about the family, but this is management. I mean, as the husband, as the father, of your household, you're managing situations on a daily basis, just like you do when you go into the office. They are different issues, but nonetheless, you're still managing people. You're still doing that. So you're providing what people need in order to become the best that they can possibly be. I love the part when you talked about the interviewing, because so often people do not know how to interview when they're in leadership. That's not a trained skill. Most people don't go off and get professional interviewing training. They don't. They're just expected by virtue of their title to field open recs. So they do the best that they can do. They don't know what to look for, how to interview, how to ask secondary, tertiary follow-up questions. They just simply do what they think is best. And a lot of times that turns out to be having the wrong person on the bench waiting to go in. Sounds like you've got a real good handle on that.
I've failed enough to kind of start figuring out how I want to do it different. So.
Oh, man. This is good. You know what, Andrew? You have provided such great, at least in my opinion, such great insight into this whole leadership. And, leadership is not just going through a standardized testing where you get labeled and they say you're this, you're that. You get a label above your forehead because your company, put you through one of these nationally known syndicated type programs. And then you come out saying, I'm this, I'm that. The things that make a difference is what comes from the heart and your desire to want to change. Like you said, there's a will do, and I'll add a can do. There are some people that simply can't do it, no matter how much they want. Even if the will is there, they just can't. Others, they don't have the desire or the will to have that, what my mother called that stick-to-itiveness in order to make it work. And you talked about those things. So when it comes to where we are, you're talking about things that make a difference. So for the managers, young, senior, older, doesn't matter. These are the things that will make you a good manager, not just, with the people with whom you work, but you'll get recognized from the people above you as well. So I've enjoyed this time. I've certainly enjoyed listening to you and learning because I've learned and I've got a few notes that I can take away there. You got any parting remarks you want to leave the audience?
I don't know. I can't think of anything at the moment. Unless there's anything else you want to know, I'm an open book. You can ask whatever you want.
I think it's great, man. I think this is awesome. This is one of those podcasts we should do again. Your insights are awesome. Your thought process, I think, is great. Like I said, I've enjoyed just listening to you talk about these things. And I'm especially impressed with the way you connect the family side of it over with the business work side, because we know that we spend more time at work, because when you're at home, there's that 8 hours of being asleep. That's not quality time with the family, even though you're at home. So your actual waking time at home is probably 4 to 5 hours at the most. And that's if you stay up until like 10 o'clock at night. You get home at 6 from a hard day at the office. You go to bed at 9. I mean, it's only 3 hours of being awake where you really are talking to the family. And if you have kids, they're doing homework, you're helping them with homework. It's not until the weekends that you get a chance to do a little bit more family time. So you're right about spending more time in the office with your coworkers. So I love the way you connected that because it is vitally important. So, you
Good
know
to
what?
humanize the business conversation, right? And make it personal too, right? So like my playbook, I try to humanize the piece of it, because it's one thing to just have your process down. It's a different thing to like understand the relationship need of business and sales and what's important. And so people will resonate more with the personal analogies and anecdotes you provide than they will just the business book that you speak to them. And so that's just something for anybody on here listening to think about too. Like when you're sharing any amount of data or story with somebody, people will connect with the personal piece more so than the business most times. In fact, less the people that take a class or listen to a podcast or listen to any sort of training, that will retain less than 10% of what they heard in a 45-minute amount of time or an hour amount of time. They will retain less than 10% of that immediately following. And it considerably drops the next day and the next day and the next day. So when you decide to speak to your audience or to coach your team, consider that. Like, what's most important, right? You don't have to just fill in time and fill in gaps and speak. It's there's some pieces that are going to be extremely important. So always weigh that.
I love that. That is a great way to end it. And I'll end it with this quote from Maya Angelou. She said, "People won't remember much of what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel." And what you're talking about is how you make people feel if you're in a position of leadership and how you treat the world. That's what people will remember. Mr. Andrew, I'm telling you, great job, great insight, wonderful opportunity for you to share some of these things with this listening audience or viewing audience. So I want to thank you very much there. It's been great having you on board. Thank you for being with us. Would love to do it again. And for those out there who've been watching, if something has touched you and made an impact in your life, once again, we encourage that you subscribe to the channel and become part of our viewership. We would certainly love to have you. So for this episode of the Inside Scoop, we want to thank our guest, Mr. Andrew Bickers, and thank you all for joining us. Stay tuned for another episode. Bye for now.
For more exclusive leadership insights, be sure to subscribe to the Inside Scoop on YouTube and Spotify. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that share button and spread the word. See you next time on The Inside Scoop.